bitten by a tick when I was a kid. And I noticed that I had trouble keeping up with my twin sister. I had pain and I didn't have the energy, but I didn't pay any attention. And then 34 years ago, I started getting terrible pain, waking up in the morning like I was run over by a truck, not enough energy, barely to breathe. I felt like I didn't have any life energy in me. If I worked, I could only work for a year or maybe not a year. And then I had to rest for several. I ended up getting in those 34 years, I ended up going downhill. And of course, everybody said I had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, and that just didn't feel right to me. They would give me medicine that would just not work at all, maybe for 3 months, and then it didn't work at all. And I just kept getting worse and worse to where I ended up being housebound for 20 years, 15 years, something like that. And then I was pretty much bedridden for 10 years. My husband, Dan, through prayer and serendipity, ran across a Lyme disease doctor that works in Pennsylvania and comes down to our Charleston area on vacations. He had Lyme disease for 5 years, and Dan was talking to him and telling him what I was going through, and he said she needs to get a Lyme disease test. We begged our doctor for a Lyme disease test. One doctor said, "Did you see a rash?" And I said, "How could I see a rash? I was a kid. I wasn't looking for rashes. It was probably on my back, the back of my legs. Nobody noticed a rash." So they didn't want to test me because I hadn't seen a rash. So he said no, and I went to another doctor, and they said no. And the Lyme disease doctor that Dan met while he was here on vacation said, call iGenetics out of Palo Alto, California, and have them send you papers and a Lyme disease kit. And so I had the papers and I filled them out. My doctor, she sent it in and it came back negative. And then I showed her the paperwork and the lab work on from iGenetics and asked her to sign off on them, because she had to have a doctor sign off on them, and she fought me about it. And it ended up being an argument, and I just plain demanded that she sign it, and reluctantly she signed it and said, "You're going to cost me $1 million because of signing this." And I thought, well, that's your problem, and I don't think that's going to happen. My problem is wanting to live. So we sent the test into iGenetics and waited, and it finally came back that I had Lyme disease and 2 or 3 co-infections. And I'm 71. 34 years means that has taken, when it first acted up, that has taken half of my life away from me. The symptoms were horrendous. I had constant pain. I had an MRI because my neurologist wanted to check for MS. And part of my brain here had shrunken away from the scalp. It just wasn't there anymore. Dr. Smith, my husband's buddy, the Lyme doctor, I call him buddy now, he calls me sister because he had Lyme disease. I call him brother. And he recommended Dr. Jemsek. He said he's the best. He said you could come to Philadelphia, but really you should go to Dr. Jemsek because he is the best. So we made an appointment, and we came in. That was in August, after my son's wedding in May, and I just couldn't function. My brain didn't work. I didn't understand words people were saying. I couldn't think of words, It was just totally foggy. It was like I wasn't even, I don't know, I just felt like it was outside of my body and I couldn't answer anything. So we came to Dr. Jemsek, and he looked at the test, and then he started asking me questions from when I was a child, and what did I notice at this age and that age. And after we had gone through all that, he kept getting more and more furious, more and more furious. And he said, you are so sick. You're very, very sick. Not one of these doctors checked for any one of those diseases. What they do is they would just, oh, she must be a hypochondriac, so we will give her pain pills and an antidepressant, and I was on my way. They didn't really want to have to deal with me, actually. As sick as I was so happy to hear Dr. Jemsek say, you have Lyme disease, and you've been very, very sick, because everybody kept thinking I was, it was in my head, and it was in my head, it was in my brain. I asked him, I said, I'm 70 at the time, and I said, have you ever treated anybody at this age? And he paused a minute and was telling me I was going to have to go on IV and everything. And I said, really excited, I said, let's do it. And I was excited. So he took me on. And it's like, I know, I mean, with each step, whether it's bad or not, I have a very positive attitude. All my life I've had 2 cancers I've lived through for 35 years and 20 years the second one. And I was just prepared for anything, because 34 years was gone from my life, and I wanted to make it through Christmas. So we started on intravenous IVs. The first 3 months I had to rest because I didn't have an immune system. My adrenal gland barely worked. I had 2 weeks between the IVs and the orals, and that was way into the treatment. I had 2 weeks that I was shocked. I had never felt that way in my whole life. I felt so alive and so good and energetic, and I wanted to clean the house from top to bottom, which I hadn't even been able to get out of bed and walk. It's really hard to go through because you're killing Lyme, and as you kill them, as they die, there's a death toxin to them, and the death toxin can make you sick. It gets very discouraging at times when you go through this, because you can get, with the death toxins, you can get really sick. You feel fluish, you might have a fever, you're in the bathroom one way or another, both ways sometimes, and you can feel really sick, but I beg you not to give up, because that shows that you're killing those little spiral cheats, and you're blasting away the biofilm to get to them. And so that is such a blessing when you get sick, and it feels horrible, and you think, oh, I can't continue with this. But I'll tell you what, I was literally dying, and I had to get through it. And I hope that you decide to come to Dr. Jemsek and start treatment also if you have Lyme. Because these little buggers can kill you. And I would hate for that to happen to you. I would hate for you to feel the way that I did. And I went through times where I didn't know if I could take anymore. It was bad. I just didn't know if I could take anymore. Dan was worried about me. I was having seizures because my sodium was getting low. I ended up in ICU. But it was working. They were dying. And today I'm on orals, but I'm on the 2 week between the orals. And today, amazingly enough, I can walk. I hadn't been able to walk in a very, very long time. I had a wheelchair. I had a walker first, and then I had a wheelchair. Today, I pushed my wheelchair instead of my wheelchair pushing me. And I haven't done that in years. That is so exciting. But just remember, Dr. Jemsek is the best. You've got the best right there. And he really, really cares about you individually. He really cares about you. And I hope you decide to go ahead with his treatment. It works. My brain works. My body works. I don't have pain. It works. It works, and I'm going to live at least another 20, maybe 30 years. My mother, everybody else died in their 90s, so I'm giving myself back the 34 years that I lost. And I hope you give yourself back